Well, as we move into the business section, I wanted to take a moment just to introduce the chair of the next session, my very good friend, Mitch Thomashow. We seem to have been joined at the hip for the last several years. We were fellow alums in the same class of the Harvard School of Remedial Education for Possible Future Presidents. That was us. That was us. We're retiring within almost 2 weeks of each other. We have Mitch at Unity and my time at College of the Atlantic, shared Maine and an educational philosophy and much else. The reason I'm interested in introducing Mitch this morning, though, is to show that he too can embrace change. And so can I. At all of the meetings that we've been to before, I have not worn a tie. I mean, I have worn a tie. And today I'm not wearing a tie. I am shocked to find out that Mitch has a tie. I don't think he wore a tie at his inauguration, if I recall correctly. And so, you know, as even late in life, Mitch is obviously embracing cultural change. But as a co-chair of the steering committee of the President's Climate Commitment, Mitch is now going to give us an update on the programs in which we are all partners. Mitch, please.
David, let me move this over here. It really feels great to be known. And I'm glad you noticed the tie. I just bought this tie because my brother-in-law, he's an admiral in the Coast Guard, and he was retiring from the Coast Guard Academy. And I had to go down there, and I realized I didn't have a tie as I was driving down from New Hampshire, actually, to Connecticut. You're right, I didn't have a tie, at least in my home in New Hampshire. And I went to a mall, and I didn't know where the clothing stores were. So I asked some woman, well, is there a clothing store nearby so I can get a tie? And she said, yeah, go into Kohl's. And I thought, isn't that a supermarket? Well, I found this one. So, yeah. Yeah. All right. I'm the president of Unity College for one more week. My successor, Stephen Mulkey's here. Stephen, you raise your hand. And he's going to do a phenomenal job because he's so totally committed to these issues that we're here discussing today. I want to just frame the meeting for us in a way that hopefully makes sense and gets us launched most properly. So this is, I aim this at something in particular, Tony, or?
Just hit the arrow to the right?
Yeah, I did. Aim it at my head, perhaps? Aim it at my tie.
Turn it on.
Oh. So, don't you love the helplessness? I mean, really, there. It's great to go from helplessness to a reminder of the global emergency. But we do need to be reminded. And as a college president, I would start every single meeting by reminding people of why we're an environmental college. And anytime I do any kind of talk, it's essential that we frame it by understanding this is where we are and we must act, and we're the ones to do it. Second Nature is providing a lot of resources in this regard, especially this new one from Diane Dumanowski, which I recommend to all of you. I want to go over for you, once again, the logic of why we were here as a way to start the day. The logic is this. It's really quite simple. First, climate disruption poses a fundamental threat to civilization. Two, and most importantly, from our perspective, higher ed has the societal mandate and ability to lead society to a sustainable future. It's the most important mission of higher ed right now, and by the way, I think clearly linked to everything else that we do. What's the other major challenge right now for higher ed? Affordability and accessibility. That's completely and totally linked to what we're doing in relationship to sustainability. So you can call it the double AS, affordability, accessibility, and sustainability. Everything we do in that regard matters and is very important. Third aspect of the logic is that the ACUPCC enables higher education to make a collective impact, working together to lead society. And finally, fourth, we're the only sector with a critical mass that's committed to climate neutrality. There it is. That's why we have an organization. That's why we're all here right now. We need to remember these 4 sequential steps. And I'm going to add a 5th one to it, which is your challenge for today. And that challenge is that we need to step up with our leadership. We need to do better, and I'm going to explain more about that in a moment. I would always say at any Unity College convocation, we're doing really well, but we're just not doing good enough. We need to do better yet. And I think that's true for us here at the ACUPCC. The progress that we've made has been staggering. We're going to show some slides in a moment which will let you see that very graphically, but we have so much more work to do. So it's our responsibility. This organization's at a watershed point, but let me go on. Look at what we've done. 675 signatories. Is that accurate right now? Okay. Because usually, I remember in the early days, it was, wait, flash bulletin, there's 5 more. Wait, flash bulletin, there's 5 more. 6 million students, 50 states in DC, 600 schools have reported on GHG emissions. You can see it all. I don't need to read it to you. This is extraordinary. It's taken place essentially over a 5-year period of time. So the proliferation of our efforts over 5 years, I got to say, going back, I'm a child of the interdisciplinary 60s, going back to the late 1960s, this is the most extraordinary time that I've seen in terms of the opening of the possibilities for how we think about the relationship between humans and the environment. Here's the graph. It's flattened out a bit. By the way, it's also flattened out for ACI. And the reason why is because we've grown so much over a 5-year period of time. Look at that. That's just like the hockey sticks that Paul was showing us before. It's really a phenomenal growth rate, and a lot of it happened during the toughest economic times as well, which says something too. But now we're at a watershed point. And that means, how do we go further from here? How do we get better at what we do? How do we ensure maximum compliance? How do we ensure that we continue to innovate with all of the things that we do on our campuses, and we push the ACUPCC and all its objectives forward? Here are the reporting rates. 67% are in fulfillment. Well, think about retention rates at your colleges. That's not good enough, right? It's just about on the margin. Now, I think it's pretty good for a brand new organization, but it's not good enough. We need to get into the 80s. That's what I say on campus, like the same thing. We need retention rates in the 80s. If we can do it at Unity College, we can do it with the ACUPCC. Right? So that's one of the most important things that we need to be discussing, and it has to be on all of your minds right now. How do we make sure we get this done? Because this is a peer-reviewed process. This is not just a hollow signature. This is something that has some real teeth to it, and we don't want to let up on that. We want to make sure this matters. Here are reporting rates by institution types. I'm not going to go over this in too much depth right now, but you can see that the associate colleges is the area where we need to do the most work, and I think that's where we have to focus a lot of our attention. There's so much potential and possibility there. And here are the climate neutrality target dates. Now, this is a very interesting one. We were discussing at the steering committee yesterday how, you know, the 2050 to 2100 it's almost an inconceivable time. Yet it's really not that far away either. But I think anything that we can do to bring those target dates closer makes the most possible sense. Because as Tony pointed out in our meeting yesterday, damage has been done. At this point, there, you know, anything that we do between now and 2050 has a lag time to it. So that should hasten the urgency even more. I want to mention STARS at this point as well, because STARS is another program that has the potential to really transform campuses, and we all need to be involved in that one as well. So if your campuses aren't members of ACI, they ought to be, and they ought to be immediately, because this is really the cutting edge and the groundbreaking dimension of how students, faculty, staff, and administrators on a campus all work together to make something happen. So STARS is a very important aspect of ACUPCC implementation. And I want to briefly, I don't need 20 minutes for sure, I want to briefly talk about how everything that we do on a campus makes sense and how we all ought to think about this as we move forward today. I have a stock talk that I give that takes an hour. You're going to get the 3-minute version of it. called The 9 Elements of a Sustainable Campus. And the point of this is to show that every different corner of a college campus, or for that matter, a hospital, or a business, any campus anywhere has to deal with all these aspects of things. Okay, what happened to the E in governance there, and the interpretation? That's kind of funny, actually. Maybe there's 11 elements. Yeah, that's the problem. The ones that we typically deal with are the first 3. And they're the ones where the ACUPCC has focused a lot of its attention, as well as number 4 and 5, by the way, energy, food, and materials. We're constantly thinking about energy. More of our campuses are growing local food. We were really raving about what Sodexo presented to us last evening. And we just heard about materials. So this needs to be part of everything that we're doing, because that's where we could have the tangible maximum impact in terms of carbon emissions. By the way, just one little editorial point. To me, climate disruption is a subset of the far bigger issue of the 6th mega extinction, species extinction, and habitat fragmentation in general. Climate disruption happens to be the one that we're looking at right now, and it just exacerbates all the others. Sustainability has become the new environmental studies. But there is this bigger question of biospheric health that we're all obviously dealing with. 4, 5, and 6 community is another area where we could have a tremendous impact as college presidents, administrators, and sustainability coordinators. I think there's a direct relationship between how we implement sustainability and how we govern our campuses. Are our sustainability practices transparent? Are they incorporated by all sectors of the campus? Is everyone involved in it? I think you know that you've arrived when there are sustainability initiatives that take place on your campus that you don't even know about. When someone comes up to you and lets you know about something, and unless you're a complete and total control freak and it makes you nuts, unless something like that, when that starts happening and you're not aware of it, then you know you're doing a good job. So that's how thoroughly this needs to be incorporated throughout the campus. And investments. We are all mini markets, as we well know. That was one of the reasons for the ACUPCC's origins to begin with. Every time that we make a decision that's a good decision in relationship to climate and environment, we are making a short and long-term investment, regional investment in our community. And finally, it's often forgotten, but wellness is part of this as well. Do we have healthy environments that we live in? And that's one of the ultimate goals of sustainability. Finally, 7, 8, and 9 is the whole learning aspect of it. And this is something that we're all involved in, whether it's HE or the U.S. Green Building Council or SED or the ACUPCC. It's curriculum, interpretation, and aesthetics. Curriculum has been a real challenge for all of us. There's going to be a committee later that's going to report on what they're doing in relationship to the ACUPCC. I think Paul Rowland's going to talk about that. We're going to have Jim Beiser talk about adaptation, and that's a very important aspect of curriculum too. Interpretation is another area that's very special to me, and I want to mention that very briefly as well. I think it's crucial that any time we do anything in relationship to sustainability on our campuses, there's really first-rate signage. We have so many people, so many visitors that come through all the time, and I've been in so many LEED buildings where you wouldn't even know they were LEED buildings because there's no signage. So talk about low-hanging fruit. If you can put really good signage up everywhere on campus, or assume that everyone who visits your campus is coming for the first time and needs to learn about what you're doing in relationship to sustainability, there's a tremendous amount that you can get accomplished. And finally, aesthetics, bringing art to the mix matters as well. So this is a kind of, imagine this as a Venn diagram or a Boolean set where all of these things interrelate and interreact, and you can see how anything that you do in relationship to energy also requires interpretation, perhaps aesthetic, and surely governance. You can start anywhere. It's hologrammatic in a sense. You can start with any of these 9 elements and ask the question, through anything that I've done on my campus, have I covered all 9 of these bases? And if you have, it's comprehensive. And if you haven't, you need to do better. So applying that same logic to our day today, that's how we want to proceed. We want to make sure that what we're doing is comprehensive, that we exercise our own leadership, and that we empower all whom we work with to take leadership as well. Now I'd like to introduce Scott Bass, the Provost of American University, because you need to save that date. That's when the next one of these is going to happen. And by the way, I want to also take this opportunity, just before you come up, Scott, to thank Tony and the ACUPCC staff. This summit has been phenomenal, and what I like about it more than anything is that we're going to have a lot of chance for all of us to talk and meet and work together later today. But the energy here is fantastic. Thanks to everyone involved, And I'm sure next year's will be just as good, Scott.